Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 11th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Hard to believe, Jill, on this March 11th. Today was the day 5 years ago that the world changed. The day that the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. The day that Tom Hanks tested positive. The day that the NBA canceled its season.
I remember it very well because I was sitting at the anchor desk at my old job at Cheddar. And my boss at the time, Jim Roberts, walked in and looked at me and said, "This is not a normal news day." And he was right.
Well, one way to describe what unfolded there in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. But remarkable when you think about it that it's been 5 years, Jill. We're now, as of tomorrow, we'll be closer to a decade removed from the pandemic than when it started. And it really has been life-altering, I think, for, well, all of us globally. And I'm not sure the world will ever quite be the same.
It has. And really, depending on what stage of life you were in when the pandemic hit, I think really influenced how it impacted you. There's young people who this was their college experience was during the pandemic. There were young parents like myself. We moved out of the city to the suburbs. So you had this exodus of people moving. There were older people like my parents and their friends and grandparents out there who were scared to go near their grandkids and were at the highest risk and still are actually. So really such a life-altering time and hopefully one that we will not have to go through again.
No, never again. And I should say, obviously had a lot of dark moments there. Millions of people died around the world. At the same time, was a pivot point for so many. Was the origins of this Mo News began during the pandemic then. At the time, I was just sharing news on Instagram with a couple hundred friends and family. Now there's slightly more of you than that. So certainly for many folks starting their own businesses, entrepreneurial, changing what they were doing both professionally and personally in their lives. So there's a lot to go into there. We'll do a bit at the end of the week with the newsletter, trying to mark with our Friday edition all of the major things that have changed due to the pandemic.
Okay, now to the headlines here. Our top story today, the legal and free speech debate surrounding the arrest of an anti-Israel protest leader at Columbia University. Federal officials say that they have revoked his green card. Meanwhile, the stock market continues to tumble. Its worst day in about 3 years on Monday after comments by President Trump this weekend where he said that he would not rule out a recession.
The thing the markets hate the most, uncertainty.
Canada has a new prime minister. What to know about banker Mark Carney and what he is saying about Canada's fight with the United States. We're tracking a collision off the coast of England. A U.S. fuel tanker and a Portuguese ship collide in the North Sea on Monday. Back here in the U.S., job trackers are noticing an uptick in the number of jobs that are asking for people skilled in AI models. Meaning, Moshe, is it possible that AI might be creating more jobs than it's taking away?
We don't know more, but we do know new jobs.
Plus, 5 years after the COVID pandemic, doctors are still burned out from changes in the healthcare industry that have made their jobs more task intensive. And finally, X, or Twitter, was down for several hours early Monday. Elon Musk saying it was because of a massive cyber attack from a large organization or even a country.
Very frustrating for those of us who obsessively check X, Jill, for all the latest headlines.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, while some of us in the Northeast start to enjoy 60-degree temps this week, a look back at on this day in history, the Great Blizzard of 1888, 55 inches of snow in New York City.
That, Moshe, is a lot of snow.
Especially in 1888, Jill.
What do you even do?
You get the horses out. We'll dig into it.
Okay, let's start with this story that has sparked a lot of conversation in Washington and around the country about free speech and protests. Federal immigration officials arrested an activist this weekend who previously led anti-Israel protests at Columbia University. Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia graduate student who is originally from Syria, is a green card holder with a permanent residency in the United States. He was arrested Saturday night at his Columbia University-owned apartment near campus. The Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, agents say that they were acting on a State Department order Part of an effort by President Trump to crack down on anti-Semitism on college campuses, the Department of Homeland Security accused Khalil, who is of Palestinian descent, of leading activities, quote, aligned to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. But they didn't lay out any specific charges or crimes associated with the arrest. His student group was involved in previously taking over buildings on campus and distributing materials supportive of Hamas and their October 7th attack. Authorities had originally told Khalil that they were revoking his student visa, but learned he was a green card holder and said that they would be revoking that status as well. Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted on X that the administration will, quote, be revoking the visas and or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported.
Yeah, President Trump also chiming in on Monday on True Social, saying that Mahmoud Khalil was a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come, Trump says. We know that there are more students at Columbia and other universities who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it. He says that they will find, apprehend, and deport any terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again. The president actually said they're not just students, they're what he called paid agitators. A lot of legal issues here. Again, as you laid out, we didn't get specifics from any of the major federal agencies as to what specific crimes they're going after him on here. Now, U.S. law does prevent foreigners linked to terrorist groups from obtaining visas. Khalil's lawyer, though, says that they cannot legally revoke a green card without a charge or a court hearing. So you can get a student visa. There's a slightly lower threshold for that. Green card is a permanent residency, though. So, effectively, they're near U.S. citizenship. And so they just arrested him, put him in a facility. Unclear what facility they put him in. His wife, who's an American citizen who happens to be pregnant right now, has been looking for him and was having trouble identifying the facility to actually visit him over the weekend. The lawyer for Khalil says that they'll be filing a habeas corpus petition, asking that Khalil be seen by a judge to challenge the validity of the arrest. And so there's questions here about the arrest itself, and then questions about revoking a green card here. There does need to be a court process. It's interesting as we talk about all the various things the Trump administration is testing here. It appears they're testing the law on green cards. Now, the government views a green card as a privilege, not a right. He is accused of organizing protests that glorified Hamas, that glorified the October 7th attack. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization here in the U.S., though it does not appear, based on what we've seen publicly, that he has a direct relationship with Hamas, as in he's not a member of the organization, just a supporter of the organization. Is that enough? Is that enough to take away someone's green card? Well, a judge will have to rule on that. Jill, you could easily see this case going all the way to the Supreme Court or near the Supreme Court as they test this. Typically, revoking a green card took like actually committing, a violent crime or a major crime, or again, being an official member over an organization, fundraising for an organization. It's unclear. They haven't said exactly what evidence they have on him at this juncture. And, we'll see here how various judges here potentially could rule on the merits of the case and whether the State Department's in the right here, the federal government's in the right, or Khalil is in the right.
It sounds like a lot of it is going to depend on what, quote unquote, supporting a terrorist organization actually means. Is it just defending their actions, or do you have to actually be materially supporting them in some way?
Yeah, that's why it's interesting constitutionally here. It has free speech ramifications. And so that's where you could easily see this rising all the way to the highest court in the land.
So Khalil has been one of the leading voices and negotiators for Colombia's anti-Israel protesters, some of whom built encampments and took over a school building last year, which some Jewish students said threatened their safety and their learning. More than 100 students were arrested, not including Khalil. He was suspended and then reinstated from Colombia last spring. And last week, he helped lead negotiations at Barnard College, a women's college affiliated with Columbia, after students were expelled for disrupting a course on Israel.
Yeah, there's a lot of statements attributed to the organizations that he has helped overseen. One that got a lot of circulation and was then deleted on social media had the group saying that they want to bring forth the downfall of Western civilization, among other statements that some of the members of this group have stated publicly. Now, not surprisingly, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, put out a statement saying that this was the ripping of a student from their home, challenging their immigration status, detaining them solely based on their political viewpoint, will chill student speech and advocacy across campuses. So the ACLU against this. Meanwhile, the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, says that there should be swift and severe consequences for those who provide material support to foreign terrorist organizations or conceal their identities, while acknowledging the need for due process to revoke a green card here. And so again, at issue here is material support for foreign terrorism. What does that entail? Can it just be speech? Can it be social media posts? Or does it need to be something more than that?
The Trump administration has made Colombia its first target of the president's executive order to root out anti-Semitic harassment in schools and on college campuses, announcing it has canceled $400 million in federal grants and contracts to the university. Colombia was the epicenter of student protests last year that spread across the country. The president posted on Monday that he was proud of ICE agents that arrested Khalil and that this was the first arrest of many to come. In fact, ICE agents tried to arrest another woman at Columbia over the weekend without a warrant, but were prevented from entering her apartment. All right, now to the state of our economy. The stock market fell significantly on Monday, with investors concerned about tariffs and a lot of uncertainty surrounding a potential recession. The Monday sell-off was mostly in response to an interview that aired on Sunday with Fox News, where President Trump did not rule out a recession when asked. Here's a bit of that interview with Maria Bartiromo asking Trump if he expects a recession.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I mean, I think it should be great.
So that wasn't a no, Moshe. The president again asked about it on Air Force One on Sunday. He defended the remarks, but said that tariffs would bring in hundreds of billions of dollars and make America rich.
Are you worried about a recession? Maria Bartiromo asked you and you kind of hesitated.
I'll tell you what, of course you hesitate. Who knows? All I know is this. We're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have open factories. It's going to be great.
Jill, what's notable about this, one, as I said at the top, and you know this from covering the floor, traders want to know what's going to happen. Like, they want to trade in advance, sell what they need to, buy what they need to, because they like predictability. And typically presidents like to say, with certainty, there will be no recession. Do not worry. The fact that he's leaving the door open to it, that's one of the key issues here.
Meanwhile, his Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on Meet the Press over the weekend, and he said what investors wanted to hear, that there was no chance of a recession. It came off a rough week in the stock market the week prior as Trump imposed and then delayed tariffs on Mexico and Canada. So now just a status update here. The S&P 500 is down nearly 10% from February when it was at an all-time high. The NASDAQ, where many of the big tech names are traded, down 14% from its high. So that is considered what's called correction territory. And there are also concerns now about job losses. The most recent jobs report did not reflect government layoffs and deportations from the beginning of Trump's term. So those are expected in the jobs report coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah, you got all the Doge stuff happening. You got the deportation stuff happening. And keep in mind, some businesses are worried about that these people are filling key roles there in sectors like construction, agriculture, places where it's hard to fill those jobs with Americans or incentivize Americans to take those jobs. So a lot happening here that is we haven't seen before in concert. And that's why the markets are going through these fluctuations. Jill, one trader, called it politely the muck around and find out policy. You can change muck to start with a different letter there, and that would be the more non-family friendly version of it. But basically, the tariff policy, federal government slashing and spending. Keep in mind, the federal government spends a lot of money and boosts things. You know, we talked about just recently in the story about Colombia. They're cutting $400 billion in funding to Colombia. Well, that is jobs, right? And that can go across the board to nonprofits that were being funded by USAID. They're laying off people. We've heard from you. So while, bottom line, as far as Trump is concerned, it's all about cutting government spending and doing things that he believes is right for the U.S. economy. It's a lot at once. And what it means is uncertainty for the markets here. Who are the winners and losers of all of this? We don't know yet because this is all in flux. And what's particularly concerning here to traders and business leaders is that he's effectively saying, yeah, I might need to inflict some damage on the U.S. economy here or do things risking damage, but don't worry. In the long term, we're going to be okay. Terms that Trump used in that clip we just played, like a period of transition. But what I'm doing here is building a strong economy. And the fact that now he said multiple times in recent days, he's ignoring the markets. We've known this. We've told you this. For Trump, the metric of success until very recently was the markets do well. And if the markets go down, he's going to correct himself on that. And you certainly saw that last week with the tariffs announced on Canada and Mexico, and then kind of gradually removing various tariffs as the days went on, as the market went down. And so the question is, how serious is he that he's ignoring the market here? How serious is he that he's going to do things that will impact us through a, quote, period of transition? And how painful is that transition going to be here?
Two quick things here, Moshe. One, when I quickly read the script earlier, I thought it was Musk around and find out.
he is also musking around and finding out. Muck around and find out. Musk around and find out. Yeah.
And second, I think that the president might be quite serious about he himself being able to handle a big downturn in the economy, or a big downturn in the market. A lot of his biggest supporters, as you mentioned, have a lot of money invested on Wall Street. So it's, I think, a question of how much they're going to take before they start calling him.
Certainly, even look in his cabinet. You mentioned Howard Lutnick, who's like, there will be no recession. Howard Lutnick, a former executive at Cantor Fitzgerald, right? Led Cantor Fitzgerald, very familiar with Wall Street, knows what they want to hear. He's saying that. His Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, actually on Friday on CNBC, called it a, quote, detox period for the economy when it comes to cutting government spending. Well, we know what detox can be like. It's not painless for people and can be pretty painful for some period. So the fact that they went with the detox metaphor, significant there. And Bessent, by the way, himself a billionaire. Lutnick is worth hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion. These guys spent years on Wall Street. They're getting a lot of calls from their old friends being like, what is happening here? Are we sure about this? Why can you get in the president's ear on this? So imagine right now behind the scenes, there are a lot of conversations happening, especially if these markets continue to tumble here.
Time for the speed read from the Canadian Globe and Mail newspaper. Canada elected a new prime minister and leader of its Liberal Party on Sunday. Mark Carney is a former banker, and he was governor of the Bank of Canada during the 2008 global financial crisis and the Bank of England during Brexit. He is a wealthy businessman who has never held public office. So he is seen as what they call a centrist technocrat. He won 85% of the vote from his Liberal Party voters. He has been tapped to lead during a time of economic turbulence and a lot of uncertainty in Canada amid tariff threats from President Trump. During his acceptance speech, Carney said that Canada will keep retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. in place as long as President Trump continues with the trade war.
We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
Carney has proposed shifting the country away from trade with the United States and instead look for other reliable partners. The former banker also taking shots at Trump's repeated calls to absorb Canada as the 51st state.
Jill, he was pretty blunt about this. He said, America is not Canada, and Canada will never, ever be part of America in any way, shape, or form.
So the way it works in Canada is that Carney will lead Canada's Liberal Party and now the country until there is a federal election later this year. The election comes as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stepped down amid mounting criticism about his leadership.
So to put this in terms for our American listeners to understand, the parliamentary system in Canada is unique. But this would be the equivalent if last year, as he was so unpopular, Biden stepped down and gave Democrats enough time to have their own process, their own primary, potentially an open convention, and elect a new leader. And then that person became president before the election. So imagine after the convention, they gave it to, in this case, Kamala Harris, though they didn't really have much of an open process. And then she was able to be president going into the election with Trump. That's effectively what you have here in Canada. Trudeau blamed for higher cost of living, higher housing costs, overstretched health system, dealing with the same issues we've now seen leaders around the world, parties around the world deal with. The leader in the UK, gone. Macron, deeply unpopular, his party losing power. The German chancellor, gone. The Japanese prime minister and his party, gone. The Democrats, wiped out of power in Washington. So you've seen this, and those are just a few of the examples around the world, as there's been growing public frustration with existing leadership, inflation around the world, etc. Canada is not immune to that. So Trudeau went, his party had a process. And so what happens here? Mark Carney is now prime minister. They have to have elections in Canada based on the law by October. There are multiple parties in Canada. The most prominent of them is the Liberal Party, now led by Mark Carney, and the Conservative Party, led by a man named Pierre Poilievre. Now, Pierre has effectively had like a 20-point lead in the polls, though that is a much smaller margin here. And there's actually some polls showing Carney might be able to pull it out ahead of him. One of the reasons, Trump. In Canada, people have now rallied around the Liberal Party, as unpopular as they are, because they see this threat from America. They got the American president saying, we're going to make you the 51st state. We're going to take down your economy. You should become part of the United States of America. And so as far as Canadians are concerned, they're like, well, we didn't like our guy, but we don't like that. And so there's been this rallying effect. You're seeing the same thing in Mexico. You're seeing this among other leaders around the world. When Trump attacks them, there's a rallying effect around them. You're seeing the same thing with Zelensky, who's increasingly popular in Ukraine amid what took place in the Oval Office a couple weeks ago. So it's going to be a very interesting election to watch here. Very much in Canada, they're trying to paint Pierre Poilievre, the conservative, as basically Trump 2. Now, he's much more moderate than Trump. The Canadian Conservative Party is not like the U.S. Republican Party, but it is certainly going to be an interesting election to watch. And given how things are in flux here with the tariffs, things are changing daily.
From the BBC, a U.S. fuel tanker and a Portuguese cargo ship collided in the North Sea off the coast of northeast England. The ships went up in flames in what was described as a massive fireball. And in some of the videos, you can see huge billowing smoke. More than 30 crew members on board were sent to the hospital, although it isn't clear their conditions. As of yesterday, all 37 people on the vessels have been accounted for. The crew members abandoned ship after explosions ignited on the tanker, and investigators are still trying to figure out what caused all of it.
So for those curious where this is off the coast of Hull, England. So if you've been up north there near Leeds in York, if you go towards the east coast there, this is where this took place. The tanker, the American tanker here, is operated by a U.S. logistics group called Crowley. It accused the Portuguese cargo ship of crashing into it. So a lot of investigation here as they deal with the aftermath, including, Jill, jet fuel is leaking right now. A significant amount has gone into the North Sea there. They're still trying to get numbers as of this recording. So a lot of environmental concerns as well.
From the Wall Street Journal, do you have skills working with artificial intelligence? That is a question on an increasing number of job applications for tech roles.
Jill, I don't have AI skills, but I have nunchuck skills, bow hunting skills, and computer hacking skills. Can you name the film?
Napoleon Dynamite?
There you go. Nunchuck skill. I don't know. That just triggered me right there.
I like where your head is, Moshe.
Well, I don't know how the nunchuck skills are going to help me, but it sounds like AI skills are super important.
Yeah, according to job listing data, nearly 1 in 4 jobs in the tech sector are looking for employees who are comfortable using AI. Even more than a third of IT jobs posted in January required skills in AI. Outside of tech, companies in finance and professional services like banks and consulting firms are also looking for candidates who can build AI algorithms and models to support work there. Experts say it is a direct reaction to the introduction of ChatGPT in late 2022, which made the average person more comfortable with AI technology. Now, companies across industries have realized the power of integrating AI products into their workflows. Some of the jobs listed include a large retail company looking for a data science director who can use predictive algorithms to improve store layouts, and a utilities provider looking for someone to use AI to predict wildfire risk.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jill. We talked last week about the increase in shop classes and technical skills that people are seeking out to avoid the AI economy, to find jobs that won't be impacted by AI. This would be the opposite, right? This would be leaning in to AI here, that by training yourself in AI. It could actually help with job security. Remember AI, they're referred to as LLMs or learning language models. You got to train the AI. So if you know how to work with AI here, that could be super important. Increasingly, they're seeing jobs in the tech sector and beyond say, hey, do you know how to use AI? Because we could really use your help right now. So super interesting. And it's something we've spoken about before on the podcast. You know, the concern back in the day that various technologies were going to take jobs like the internet, for example. And then ultimately, what did we find with the internet? Well, there's all these jobs that now exist because of the internet. And I guess they're finding the same thing here in AI. So as we're just very new here into the AI reality, don't mean to be like a total optimist. You know, certain jobs will go and it's going to be a painful process here, but ultimately lean into AI, at least is the lesson from this article.
From Axios, 5 years after COVID, doctors are still burnt out, and it could be affecting their patients as well. According to a poll from July, more than half of physicians say they're feeling the effects of burnout. That is down from a 2021 high of 63% in the middle of a huge wave of COVID-19 cases across the country. The pandemic exacerbated an already existing burnout issue among doctors, many forced to work long hours under highly stressful and uncertain conditions with equipment shortages and isolation protocols. So with that came increased awareness about the mental health toll that doctors and nurses were experiencing. Congress even passed a law in 2022 that created federal grants aimed at reducing and preventing burnout for health providers. But doctors say that that isn't the root problem. They say there are simply too few people doing too much work. Systemic changes in the industry have created excess administrative tasks like filing insurance claims. Payment structures have also changed, including decreasing Medicare payment rates, making it more difficult to maintain and operate a practice in today's day and age. These issues do need to be solved to keep patients safe as well. One study linked doctor burnout with 2 times more risk for patients.
Yeah, you can see the linkage there. They're trying to figure out ways to help with this. Notably, Jill, the healthcare industry is projected to add the highest number of jobs of any industry in the U.S. over the next decade. Medical school enrollment is also at the highest ever. 100,000 students currently attending medical school, despite these headlines. It sort of reminds me, I mean, as we talk today, 5 years since COVID, remember the brief period in the spring of 2020 when we were cheering on our doctors?
7 p.m.
Yeah.
Bells,
Clinking.
what was it? You'd clink something.
We would clank our pots and pans in the windows in New York City, at least. Let's bring that back. Though even the doctors would probably say, can you do more than clanking pots and pans? For
How
us
about
right
a
now?
thank you? Yeah.
A thank you. I should note, actually, my wife, Alex, posted on her Instagram account. And this is like why I love her. Well, I love her for many reasons, but she's extremely thoughtful. And recently, during a visit to our pediatrician with her daughter, she asked the pediatrician like what her hobby was. She could tell she was stressed. And the doctor said, you know, I like sushi making. Like, that's fun for me. So Alex actually went and bought like a sushi making kit for her. And actually over the weekend, we got a note from the doctor saying, my family very much enjoyed our attempt at sushi making using the, you know, various things you got me. And so have to say, not saying you should get a sushi making kit for your doctor, but maybe, you know, ask your doctor how they're doing is probably the first step to make their day slightly better with all that's going on.
I saw Alex's post. I was not even remotely surprised knowing Alex, because she is seriously, and I'm not just saying this, I think one of the most thoughtful people that I know.
Jill, on the Enneagram chart, if you're familiar with that, she's a 2, which is like very much an empath, thinking of others. Like Mother Teresa was one of them.
Well, so she's in good company.
She's in good company as a number 2 on the Enneagram chart. Yes.
I was with you guys a few months ago, and I had mentioned to Alex that I was having a lot of sinus pressure. And I'm not joking. 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later, some like sinus cleanse showed up at my door.
Yeah, sounds about right. Jill, speaking of the Enneagram chart, do you happen to know what number you are or what personality you have on the Enneagram chart?
I don't. I've actually never even heard of it. I feel like maybe one of my worst qualities is that I'm like not super empathetic. I am, but I'm like, I don't know. I probably
I
should
actually
be more
don't know that
empathetic.
there's many people in journalism that would be like the helper empath of 2, because like otherwise like we would never be able to like cover the headlines that we do.
Because you can't internalize it.
You can't
because or
internalize
else
it.
you would actually drive yourself insane and be so depressed. And I get a lot of messages from people who are like, how do you report on this stuff all the time?
Yeah.
And I think it's because I am very detached from news. I'm empathetic, I think, in my regular life, right?
Yeah.
Like I in my personal life, but at least professionally and with the news, I think you're right. Maybe it's just one of these things from being in journalism so long that we've sort of put up a wall.
And I'm not here to say that journalists don't have a soul and don't care about people. The point is that, like, covering tragedy after tragedy and some of this stuff, you do have to keep yourself a bit removed from the story in order to be able to then proceed to the next story.
I think we're just the only ones who are going to admit it. I think the other journalists will probably be like, I feel everything.
No, listen, and it's not to say you can certainly go to certain stories, and I have, where like you break down with your emotion. Having been at mass shootings and having been to the aftermath of hurricanes and tornadoes and various disasters around the world, absolutely. But you have to hold it in. As you're reporting it, as you're interviewing it, as you're having terrible conversations of like, how do we get the family of the person who died to talk to us before they talk to CNN, right? Are conversations that you certainly have in the industry. And so it is one of the reasons, I think, why there is a burnout factor. And some people leave in a matter of days, some in weeks, some in months, and some are able to sustain for a number of years. But you certainly do go through a whole, speaking of Scott Bessent and detox, there is a detox process from all of it.
I know personally, I got very burnt out from local news because every single day I was out in the field covering a tragedy and I just couldn't take it. Like you were basically, I think 4 out of 5 days of the week, I was seeing people at their worst, experiencing kind of the worst thing they were ever going to experience in their whole life. And I just physically couldn't really deal with it anymore.
Yeah, the old adage for local news, if it bleeds, it leads.
So that's why I go to the warm and fuzzy worlds of international news and politics. Okay, finally from CNN, a new attack on one of billionaire Elon Musk's companies. Yesterday, we told you about violence against Tesla infrastructure. On Monday, Musk claimed that a wave of outages on X, formerly known as Twitter, were due to cyber attacks. The problems reportedly began at around 6 a.m. Eastern time, and then again at around 10 a.m. and throughout the morning. The outages appeared to be global, but not universal for everyone. Monday afternoon, Musk wrote on X that the company was experiencing outages and attributed it to a massive cyber attack. He said, quote, "We get attacked every day, but this was done with a lot of resources. Either a large coordinated group and or a country is involved." Another person on X suggested that people were trying to silence Musk and his platform, given his closeness with President Trump. Musk replied, yes, back to that, but he didn't comment further on the motivation behind the attack.
So in that post, he didn't comment on motivation, Jill, but then he did an interview Monday afternoon where he said he believes the attack originated in Ukraine. We haven't seen evidence for that yet. That certainly raises the stakes here between what's happening between Ukraine and the White House. And we should note Musk in the past has made various claims and then had to backtrack on a few of those claims. This would be a very serious charge if, in fact, it was a Ukrainian cyber attack against X. Keep in mind that Ukraine is using his Starlink satellite technology, so that would be sort of an odd move by the Ukrainian government. Nonetheless, last year there was an interview that Musk was doing with Trump during the campaign that started 40 minutes late, and Musk said, oh, this is totally a cyber attack, and it turned out not to be a cyber attack. So big question here in terms of whether it was, and if it was, one of the other questions that people will certainly be asking, Elon got rid of like 70 or 80% of Twitter staff when he came in there, sort of the precedent for Doge. And so some people might say, well, you got rid of a lot of your cybersecurity people there, leaving the door open to a potential attack like this. So this is a quickly moving story, which I imagine we'll have more details for you on the Instagram feed throughout the day. All right, now time for On This Day in History. Promise to tell you about this blizzard of 1888. The Great Blizzard of 1888, as it's come to be known, happened in mid-March. More than 400 people were killed. 55 inches of snow fell. New York City ground to a halt. And this is like pre-car New York. This is like horse and buggy New York. At the time, 1 in every 4 Americans lived in the area between D.C. and Maine. So this was a big deal. And those of us who cover news, live in New York, we tend to always make weather in the Northeast a big deal. But this is when like most people lived up here before, the population was more distributed across the country. So you are now well informed about the Great Blizzard of 1888, Jill.
I feel like people may have thought it was the end of the world. I'm not even kidding. I mean, you don't have TV, you don't have
There's no radio.
You don't have like a way to connect with people. And it's how 55 inches, that has got to be a couple days.
That's a sign from God back then. All right. Now, to this day, in 1918, the first confirmed U.S. case of a global flu pandemic was reported among U.S. Army soldiers in Kansas. It would become known as the Spanish flu, estimated to have killed 30 million people around the world. And then, notably, 102 years later, another pandemic, coronavirus, would also be announced on this day in history. So not a great day for pandemics. But now to some lighter items. On this day in 1977, The Adventures of Winnie the Pooh premiered in theaters. My first costume with Olivia last year when she was just like a few weeks old, we both went as Pooh Bear.
I have that image in my head, actually, as we did the story about Winnie the Pooh. Thank you, Moshe.
From Winnie the Pooh to cops, bad boys, what you gonna do? On this day in 1989, with that iconic theme song, Cops, a documentary-style TV show that followed police officers and sheriff's deputies around the country, debuted on Fox, that brand new network, Fox. It had The Simpsons, it had Cops, and Cops would go on to become one of the longest running shows in TV history, and then was sort of pushed off the air during Black Lives Matter, the aftermath of George Floyd. But I believe it's back on one of those cable networks or streaming networks today. And Jill, a movie many came to love in the mid-90s, on this day in 1994, turning 31 years old today, Four Weddings and a Funeral, premiered in theaters on this day in history.
So I have never seen it. And weirdly, I was watching Mystic Pizza the other night as I was going to sleep. And I guess because I was watching that, Netflix or one of these streamers recommended Four Weddings and a Funeral. And I thought, maybe I should watch it.
Hugh Grant, Andy McDowell, some of the icons of those 90s films.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. Tell them about us. It really helps us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And please review us kindly in the App Store.
And to the hardcore types that listen to the end of the podcast here, if you're watching on YouTube, I've had a stack of boxes behind me. These are many of the pieces that are coming together to build our first podcast studio. So, Jill, you are cordially invited. I got to still unpack the boxes, plug everything in. We got to get the furniture, but it's all in motion here for a snazzy Mo News podcast studio coming to you soon.
Moshe, I was wondering what those boxes are because you made me clear like 14 things behind me that were just clutter.
Yes, clutter.
And you were right, by the way. It didn't look good. But I was like, really? You have like, cardboard boxes.
You have a bunch of boxes, but these are intentional. This is intentional clutter behind me because it tells a story about this podcast.
Okay, everyone, stay tuned.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.